Welcome to Tessera's Nerf Room. This is the N-Series Ward, a blaster released in 2024 under the N-Series line, making it the smallest and cheapest offering at this point that you can get your hands on. Since the Flex hasn't released outside of the Gear Up pack, this is currently the cheapest blaster that you can get as of the time of this recording, for $5. That's really cheap. The fact that you can get something from Nerf for $5 that's this big is a pretty big deal. Let's get into it. So the Ward is obviously an N-Series blaster, which means it fires the N1 darts. And again, I will do a whole video discussing the N-Series line altogether once I get a pretty good majority of videos put together revolved around this series and its individual blasters, because it's still too new for me to really make a verdict on what it's going to turn into right now. So that's why I haven't made like a proper video on the series, but I can talk about the blasters, and what I can also talk about is how big of a deal this thing is. First, let's start with the design, though. From a distance, it is so unbelievably basic that there's like nothing I can say. It's an orange block with a big blue block and a second blue block for the trigger and the plunger. And then you zoom in and you realize it's actually really detailed. The shell itself has lots of little angles and curves. I don't think it's quite as interesting to look at as something like the Infinite or the Pinpoint, but it definitely does get the job done. It's a little pistol, and I think it looks fine. And I think that the kind of sort of circuit board look that N-Series blasters go for works pretty well for this blaster. Not much else to say about the design, since there really isn't much to say. What about the ergonomic setup? This blaster just has a main grip since it's a tiny pistol, but it does have this big ring pull, so I'll adjust the ring pull too. First, the grip. Oh my gosh, it's really, really good. It is the N-Series style grip, but it's really long and kind of thin, and it is very, very comfortable to put your hands on. I think it's a bit too small since my thumb can easily touch my knuckle here, or not really my knuckle's up here, but like the other knuckle right before the tip of your finger. You get what I'm talking about. It can touch that, and that basically means that the grip is too small, but it definitely works fine for something that is this tiny. It's not a very big blaster, so I don't expect some kind of giant primary grip on it, even though they gave us like a primary grip for the even smaller one. But again, I'll do a video on that later. This grip is very comfortable, and I have no complaints with it whatsoever. It's a pretty good size, it's got a nice finger troil, a very nice thumb troil, and it overall feels very nice quality. Speaking of quality, the plastic quality of this blaster is very thick, and it feels like a pretty robust package. The ring pull of this blaster, however, is a completely different story. It is big enough for you to get 2 fingers through, and you can pull it back relatively easily, but it doesn't feel very good. It is skeletonized. As you can see, there's 2 individual rings that have a skeletonized pattern on the inside, and the pull tab right here is also kind of skeletonized, and it tends to flex quite a bit. It doesn't feel nearly as stable as something like a Night Finder's ring pull, and I think that's kind of this blaster's biggest drawback, is the quality of the ring pull. It takes a little bit away from the user experience of using this blaster, but it's nothing to write home about. I don't expect something like worker quality plastic out of something that costs $5. I would like to remind y'all that this blaster is $5. And what do you get for $5 in terms of functionality? Well, you get the blaster, you take 2 N-Series darts, and you front load them into the top and bottom barrels like this. And they actually go in really far to where just barely the tips of the darts are sticking out. Then you pull the ring pull back, you aim, and you pull the trigger once to fire. Then you do it again. Being a ring pull blaster, it doesn't have slam fire, though there have been some that find a way to incorporate slam fire when it hits the rear position. I don't really care, it doesn't really change anything. But I would like to point out something that is kind of a really big deal. The mechanism of smart ARs in this blaster, from everything I've heard, is a completely new mechanism that hasn't been seen in previous Smart AR blasters, which fixed the biggest problem that Smart AR always had, which was performance die-off. Here's a visual demonstration of this problem. If I take the brain saw and fire the first barrel at the door, it shoots the door pretty fast. But then from the exact same distance, if I shoot the last barrel, it shoots the door a whole lot later. Because the air is being redirected through so many barrels in such a sloppy manner, it causes a lot of that air pressure to die off by the time it reaches the barrel. The Smart AR mechanism definitely works, but it works questionably at best, and it doesn't work at all at worst. It's a very sloppy mechanism that's more of a proof of concept than anything, and Hasbro kind of knows this because they've kind of stopped making Smart AR blasters as much, especially after the Flip 32. Now, I obviously have not gutted this blaster or anything to see the internal mechanism of the Smart ARs for myself, since I would kind of like to keep it in one piece for the review, but from everything that I've heard, the mechanism has changed to decrease the die-off as much as physically possible. Don't take this as fact, it's not confirmed or denied at this point. It's just something that I believe is true, and I have been told by several of my friends who have actually opened this blaster and seen the internals. So I will elaborate more on that further in the future if that ends up being true and there's more blasters that use this Smart AR mechanism. For right now, don't take it at face value as a fact. What about that smoothness of operation though? The ring pull is actually pretty smooth to pull back, though the ring pull itself isn't really the best quality, and it has a pretty satisfying click when you hit the rear position. As for the trigger pull, it has no movement at all, and then it pops very nicely. The trigger itself is using a strange combination of a metal spring and a plastic leaf spring. It works questionably, but it definitely does work because it is a pretty smooth trigger pull. It sounds really scratchy, but it really isn't that bad, especially when you are actually pulling it to fire darts. There have been way worse trigger pulls out there, believe me.
Knock over one more, please. You know what? Screw it. Well, this is a lot harder than I anticipated. Oh my god. What is going on? I cannot aim for the life of me. Finally! Woo!
So what mod potential does the Ward bring to the table? Well, not too much that you wouldn't already be able to do with a Fire Strike or a Night Finder, and you'd probably be able to do it better with the Night Finder than this because this has a Smart AR mechanism. It's a different one than normal, but it is still a Smart AR mechanism, which means if you take the ARs out of it, you're turning the blaster into a shotgun or just destroying it. However, this blaster does still have a fair amount of mod potential, mainly in spring upgrades. Do you even need one? I don't know, because the spring that's in here is frighteningly gigantic. This is a big plunger tube. It's a beefy plunger tube, and it's unlike any other plunger tube I've ever seen in a blaster this tiny. There's a reason it's exposed, because the plunger tube is so big that they would have had to make the shell like 15% bigger to enclose the plunger tube inside it. And I gotta remind y'all one last time, this is a $5 blaster. You are paying $5 to get a 90-odd FPS double shot Springer pistol that is basically the same thing as a modded Night Finder with 2 shots that is made out of stuff and is very comfortable in the hand. It's pretty much all around a fantastic value, and for $5, there's really nothing to complain about here. This is a fantastic value for your dollar. Is it perfect? No, but again, $5. That's really, really cheap. And I think for $5, they give you more with this than they've ever given you for $5 before in the entire history of Nerf as a brand. So with all that said, if you want to get this blaster, I'll link it in the description below. Thank you for watching. Bye.